Traders, welcome back to the channel. We're going to be going over the Nasdaq 100, the Sp500, exactly how we're moving. We had a little bit of a bullish move going into today, but there's a few things about this run we have to talk about. Before we get into that content, I have to ask you to consider doing two things: liking this video because it does help out the channel tremendously, and subscribing because I'm posting videos every single day about the market and everything you need to know going into each trading day and overall picks as well. Let's get back to it. So what we're going to do is go over the Nasdaq first, and what I want to do is get in here really quick. So what we're looking at basically is this is last week, and then this is the beginning of this week, and right here represents the beginning or opening of this week right here, basically going into yesterday or Sunday evening when the market opened overall for futures. Now, we didn't trade yesterday, but futures were still open globally. So what's happening here and kind of how are we moving? There's a few big things I do want to discuss here. Now, when we overall look at what's happening, I want to see if you can spot really what's happening today here on the Nasdaq and yesterday. Now, yesterday wasn't surprising for me in particular. So if we go to something about like the 1 hour to really look at this, it wasn't that surprising that we didn't have volume. And if you look, you can come down, we can actually mark right here represents where that volume is. So you can see this is where the week starts and this is where we're at now. You can see even with today, there's been very minuscule amounts of volume. Now let's go back to Friday. Friday, we kind of found that bottom and then you started going back up. Again, Friday, we're starting about right here. What happens? Pretty minimal volume. A little bit coming in, to the actual market open on the day, but still very minimal. Go back a little bit further, Thursday through Wednesday, still non-existent. Now it's worth mentioning going into Thursday, that's when we had our biggest day overall of shorting, right? So if you go back to this day, right here, we had this downtrend. This is one of the largest amounts of shorting that we've had on the market. I believe it was second overall in the history of the Nasdaq and S&P. Now, what's going on here? What am I saying? So it's important that we do accept what we're looking at right here overall with this volume. It's important to realize because we're moving up with nothing. That's essentially how I view this. I'm just going to erase everything and we're going to zoom back in here. Now, there's a few areas I am looking for, about right here, about 11.7 flat all the way up to the highs of this level. Maybe even we push to the weekly 11.85. Totally possible. That weekly we had from last week. These are all possibilities. But you can just see just steady uptrending. Now, if we go back to some of the reversals that we have had, and that's what I want to do too, is really take a look at the reversals that we have had. So I don't really consider either one of these real reversals. If you want to see a real one, you can go back to about May when you had that nice push up and you trended at locally 13. Your one back in March, everyone remembers that big rally. These are very volatile rallies, very big moves up. It's obvious, just straight shot back up, almost V-shaped recoveries. Very similar movement right here. This is not the same though. This is not the same. And you can also come back to these and you can still see, yeah, you're declining in volume, but you can still see you're getting spikes. You're still getting spikes, right? So you can see back here, declining volume, but you are still getting volatile spikes each day. There's nothing happening here, guys. There's nothing here. And this is very interesting to me, and it's something that I just saw as I opened up the chart to make this video. So as we're looking here, this is extremely concerning, the amount of volume that is just non-existent. Now, when we go to VIX and looking here, VIX is dumping, VIX is dumping. You opened up the week at 30.6, and you're down about $1.30. Does anyone notice something here? Anytime you've started to rally, if we go back to, that May level when you had the rally, you shot all the way back down to 24. You go back to March, you shot all the way down to lows of locally 20. Nothing's happening here, people. There's no real, downward spike on VIX. It's still very high. Sitting around $30 on VIX is extremely high. Go over to SPY. Now, SPY, you're going to get a little bit more volume to give you a little bit more answers here. If we come over to something like the S&P, looking at the futures on the S&P, look at the minimal volume. You can see it just non-existent. There's nothing there. So in my opinion, over the next few days, I'm looking for a pretty big breakout to either way with massive volume. Now, obviously, we know Tyler, I'm very bearish on the market in general. And so we're going to just come quickly into the 15-minute, and we're going to look here exactly what I'm looking at, right? So in the beginning of this day and the beginning of some of these trading days, what you've been seeing is You're getting that volatility to get you started, and then you just die off. And that's kind of what's happened today, right? It's, for me, been just a terrible trading day to watch because there's just no opportunities. There's no real day trades here. This is a lot of swinging activity. And so you can come and look at something like Tesla, right? These are one of the, I had to put on Tesla, and I still have one of them left. This one's really down. Come to the other stock like PayPal. You're back at previous lows, and you're looking for more downside. What am I saying here? You're seeing some of that upside, and this is where we were talking about the possibility of getting some of these short squeezes across the market, but you're seeing no volume, people. And that's the real indication here, in my opinion, and the concerning part of why I'm looking at more downside possibilities on the broad scale market. Everything looks extremely weak, people. If we look at everything, Bitcoin also is not really falling for this either. Bitcoin's just been falling down basically since market open to the downside. You started at about 21.7 and came down to 21.1, and it's looking like it's going to fall down even steeper. So this video, I won't be able to do the video at the end of the day, so we'll see how market closes. But looking at this overall to give you a better viewpoint of what we're talking about, because you're not getting anything at all. It's all just chop around the board, and it's with minimal volume to the upside. So every time you get in these upside spikes, it's just, there's nothing. There's just no actual volume. But what happens when you start going to the downside? As you can see, when you start coming to the downside, sellers are loading in here. Now, you don't always need a massive amount of sellers or massive volume or buyers to go to the upside. You don't need a bunch of buyers to go to the upside. You just have to have more buyers than there are sellers, correct? But when we're coming down to sellers, typically sellers have got to take control because they're going to really start pushing you down. And so you can see just the overall amount of volume that was coming in from selling, and then there is just no buyers anywhere to be found. So looking here, what am I looking at? Possibility of coming to 11.7, 11.2, 11.72 roughly. Coming here right now, you still look extremely weak, and I'm just looking for more downside across the board. I think you'll get better entry opportunities going into tomorrow because you need a clear-cut direction tomorrow. Also going into tomorrow, you have some pretty big stuff coming out as well. So we're just going to go really quickly over to Wednesday. You can see this from investing.com, see all this data as well. You do have Powell testifying early in the morning. I believe it's 10:30 Central. I want to make sure I am correct for you. And as I come in, you can see 9:30 Eastern time is right here. That's where it'll be coming out. This will also have a countdown if you want to check this out. So Powell will be speaking tomorrow. So I expect this to be moving the market in some sort of way. They've also done a study if America still follows and believes the Fed has still control over the market, and supposedly America has not lost faith. I don't know where that study was really done, but they released that information out today. I believe it was one of the Senate members that actually was talking about that as well today. So looking at this is, in my opinion, just pointing for more and more downside, just for me personally. Now, when we come over to something like Bookmap and looking at the volume, this is another big indication of the concerns that I'm having, right? So what I want to do is just track with the volume on the day. So obviously during this morning, the volatility, most volume you had. Correct. CVD, complete highs. Throughout the day, even with some of the upside that you were having, it was consistently moving down, which now it's looking like sellers have the control overall in the market at the end of the day, while you're still sitting overall pretty flat. You're seeing minuscule amounts of buyers stepping in here as well, which was trying to hold it up. And usually when you get some of these buys, it'll kind of spark a little bit of volume, but you're not getting any of that spark going into the market right now either. So looking at this, in my opinion, it's just pointing for more downside. Unless we start seeing more of these icebergs coming in for upside pressure, I just don't see it happening before the end of the day. So I'm just looking at more possibilities of downside after Powell starts talking tomorrow. But again, you're going to have to listen to exactly what he's saying and exactly how the market is reacting to what he's saying. Because we've seen him say some really outlandish things, but the market still react in a positive manner. So as I'm looking at this, that's my overall concerns. Let's look at some of the plays that I'm curious and interested in overall. Now, number one, I'm going to mention Tesla. And I know people are like, Tyler, you mention Tesla every day. It's obviously my favorite stock to look at, stock to trade overall. It just is what it is. Looking at Tesla, you're at your key level at around 727, 726. This is a very big level. You can track it all the way back here. You can see this is a clear-cut demand zone as well. Most likely going to get rejected here if you get any type of selling on indexes. Overall today, though, after you started getting this type of movement, and this is something that I want to point out for anyone and everyone that trades Tesla, when you start having this type of strength, this is one of the days it is not time to short Tesla. Okay. Now we had some opportunities. For instance, I grabbed some puts earlier in the day. I tried to write them down. The most I got up was about $250 on those contracts. Very, very minimal. Even with a $15 move, the strength on those options was to the upside. So calls are always going to pay more when you have a trend like this, even if you're getting close to in the money. So right now, I'm not looking at getting those today. I'm looking at for this to have some confirmation to the downside. What does that mean? So I'm looking for a rejection at this range going into tomorrow, right? I'm looking for these higher lows also to break as well. This is another big level that I want to be watching. I want this level to start breaking to the downside, getting below that 9 MA as well, and start ultimately pushing the view up and then back down to the weekly level. That's what I'm looking for, is a breakdown and getting back below 727. Now, also, again, we're looking at PayPal. PayPal, I believe the ship has kind of sailed. If you got in, cool. We've been talking about it as well. I believe this has more downside. We've gone over the whole viewpoint here. Obviously, short-term targets, previous lows, we break those. We're going down to roughly $55, I believe is the target there. Looking at Apple, I want to point out Apple because look at how it's moved. You had that immediate upside movement, and since then, it's been straight down. In my opinion, Apple is going to be coming back down to locally 132 all the way to 133.3. That's where I'd be looking for right now. The last one up is going to be Affirm. And Affirm is also one of the plays I'm like right now. It's one of the cheaper plays as well. You're trying to hold this low that you had previously here, and it was a weekly, looking from that range. If you break below this, you are quickly coming down to 18.3. And also 18.8 is going to be a key range. You get below these levels and you're really going to be in the works of pushing back down to these previous lows, which you had down here at 16.5 locally. So how I would be playing this is start loading up on that position. And then as you break through the key levels, is slowly start chopping off that position as you break down. So I'd probably start cutting some around this region right here, 18.8, 18.9, and then start slowly grinding off those positions as you start to fall down. I'm liking mid-July puts just so you have time to really make the maximum amount on these contracts, but that's me personally, and I do see more downside on the broad scale market. And before I let you out of here, I want to cover DXY as well. So we're looking at the dollar value, and dollar is still holding up fine. It's still holding up well. You did get a little bit of drawdown since the week opened up, but look, you're just bouncing right back. The dollar is still bullish. So anyone that's in the comments saying the dollar is bearish and you're going down, just take a look at the daily chart for just 5 minutes and look at these ranges in which you're holding and look at the overall trend on the past month. You've really just been shooting up. And if you're looking at the value of currencies, they don't typically move like this as a whole index. This is the dollar index. So the dollar index as a whole is extremely, extremely strong. And if you're looking at some sort of indicator to get a grasp of the overall strength of the market, USD to the yen is a great example. When this is going up, when the yen is going down and the USD is going up, typically is indicative of a risk off opportunity and where the market is. So they're pointing to the area of not wanting to have risk on the market. When Japanese yen is going up, typically that's when there's a risk on, when you're trying to get more risky with assets. Also going over to JNK, we still have this same overall chart, the same pennant as well. It's worth mentioning. You've had downside since the week opened up on JNK, one of our leading indicators of downside in the market. You've been going down all day long. If you look at SPY, it's been going up. One of the leading indicators, people. This is the same indicator that we had way back here as well at 407, 411. The same exact indicator. So these are things I'm looking at. These are things you need to be looking out for. JNK, one of the big indicators. As you break out from here, that's indicative of a big drop to come. Yields are still sitting very high as well. I'll be watching all of these as you're watching as well. You can see these at breakout points once again, and they're pushing up very, very strong. Keep your head on a swivel. We'll be back very soon. I'll see you tomorrow.